our next team is from Erlangen and is composed of three construction or constructing elements: Thomas, Elodie, and Peter. So,
right, thank you. I'll just explain that since October 2022, we've got a research training group at Erlangen, which is called Dimensions of Constructional Space. And this means that we have PhD students from different countries, one postdoc, Elodie, working in the constructionist framework on different languages, on a wide range of different topics, some of which you will introduce. We've got a variety of languages at the moment. There will be a second phase and possibly a third phase with maybe other languages, and that is the general context of the research. Now, we've got two Constructicon projects at the moment linked with this research training group up to a while, the CASA Constructicon of the English language, which I talked about before when it was in what I called the pre-embryonic stage, and which is now, compared with all the projects that we've been told about, has reached a kind of baby stage, but very newborn baby in a way. But it's certainly different from the other project, which is the research Constructicon. The CASA Constructicon at the moment just focuses on English. The research Constructicon will bring together the research results from the different projects. Also in CASA, we've got a clearly defined target group, and that is students of linguistics, of English linguistics, who buy the book, which we hope will be published by Benjamin's, and they will have to learn the CASA model, and the idea is that they can check the constructions they apply to the analysis of constructs through the Constructicon, whereas here it's more a target group that addresses researchers primarily. And in the CASA Constructicon, there is a focus on syntactic constructions or the syntactic end, whereas here we've got any type of construction. And the two are united and tests, and both projects want to test the applicability of construction grammar to the description of language, which I suppose we're all doing whenever we try to describe particular constructions. So let me just outline what we want to do. I'll talk about the CASA project a little bit, and then in the second part, Elodie will take over and talk about the research Constructicon, and Peter's got things to add to both aspects. So the CASA project is work that is it's called a constructionist approach to syntactic analysis. That's what CASA stands for. And it's joint work with Thomas Hoffmann from the University of Eichstätt and me. And it's first and foremost, as I said, a textbook for students of English linguistics, bridging the gap between what we teach and what we believe to be correct. And this is about the Bavarian type of exam, where we are forced to teach certain things in a way that we don't think is up to date anymore. And so we got together and thought we could maybe change that a little bit. It's also a test case for the constructionist approach and a model for combining constructions. Everybody says constructs are combinations of various constructions, but very few people have ideas about how this could work. So if you take a sentence like this one, then you can find different types of constructions. I won't go into any detail because you all know this. We've got a declarative statement construction, which is specified with respect to statement, word order, subject, and predicate. And I don't think we need the details. There is a present tense construction, a past tense construction, a perfective construction, a progressive construction, and a be going to construction. And then we've got various types of noun phrase constructions and The overall analysis that we suggest is that one would simply show which bits of the construct are related to or come from which constructions in this rather schematic way, so that you can show which contribution the various constructions make. Okay, we can discuss that over coffee if somebody is interested, but really it's a very simple way of showing the constructions that make up an utterance, similar to a model of early child syntax, interestingly, developed by Eva Dombrowska and Elena Lieven, and it shows very close resemblance to blending theory as developed by Fauconnier and Turner. And of course, we realize it's just one way of doing this. Okay, now this has had a certain impact on the Constructicon. We've got an editorial team, we've got people working on it, various aspects, and the access options will include a lexical access option and a list of lexical items occurring in constructional descriptions, as well as presumably an onomasiological axis where the comparative concepts might come in and things like that, but we haven't decided that yet. Now I'll just show you how a typical construction, a causa construction entry, or what a typical construction entry should look like. So as in the Swedish Constructicon, we've got the name of the construction first, then the semantic function, then a slot characterization, which is important for students to know which bits do we count as arguments, and then a semantic role or frame element, if you like, depending. And then the formal description, and Alexander, you mentioned the color profile already, and I always show this slide because we haven't got all that many to show, because it's a hell of a job to develop something like that if you want to have fairly representative frequency information. And we show frequency following Bybee's model by font size, and then there are examples. Users will have the option of various terminologies. So you can either go for the CASA model, you can go for traditional grammar, or what have you, and there will be an option whether you want to see the color profile or not, and if you want to see it, whether you want to see it like this, or as a list with frequency indications. And presumably, Stephanie suggested having different association measures. So depending on what the users intend to have. And then there will be a list for borderline cases, which I think is important for researchers, so that you don't pretend you can take all the decisions that maybe one should take. Then there are constructions with the same form linked, constructions with the same function, a construction hierarchy or the place in the construction hierarchy, and literature who published important work on the various constructions. And then presumably relating particular constructions to other languages. We've got a version of the ditransitive construction for Arabic, for example, but that is basically open to any other language. Now, the next slide should be yours. Yes.
Yeah, technical aspects, that's me usually. So that's really the so this whole thing came at various stages. The first version was really simple Word documents. Well, not simple actually. What you saw there was basically the way Thomas designed Word documents, which is the hard to for anything. And we needed then to oh, somebody wants to be admitted.
Sure, yes.
Mauricio. Marcelo.
Let me just try and get that.
Just
Yeah.
there. Good one.
Okay. So Yeah, no, I had too many. So we then decided to try and do a prototype for that, and that is the one that you can currently see at Constructicon.de. That is a WordPress which has static information plus manually created links. Really nothing you want to work on for a long time. And the next step then is the app that is currently being developed, Python Flask app, basically with a MySQL backend. And the original data model was done by Thomas Preusel. In its current version, it looks roughly like this. Immediately obvious, isn't it? So entity relationship model. Don't worry about it. We have basically tried to remain flexible. So every type of information gets its own representation here. And then, for instance, if you look here for the link types, we basically have a way of link types and construction links, so we can remain flexible in the ways we add additional ways of connecting constructions in the future. This whole thing is shown as a database model here. We're actually using an object relational mapper in the background for the technically minded people. The implementation is currently done by Amine Garibian with help from Philipp Heinrich and the computational linguistics department. So the idea is that this might be used as a basis for the research Constructicon because it already covers a wide range of cases of things you may want to describe, although by far not everything. But for this, we have a postdoc project in the research Constructicon, as Thomas just pointed out, and that's Elodie.
Yes, so we just presented the CASA, which is a reference Constructicon, and when we applied for the research training group, we said that we wanted to develop a research Constructicon that brings together and interconnects constructional description as well as experimental results obtained in the various research projects. So the various research projects are the one carried on by the 15 PhD students, and the kind of data that we want to put in differs from what you will find in a reference Constructicon. So we assume that in a reference Constructicon, you have at least as a goal, as a maybe unattainable goal, but as a goal to model the construction of L1 speakers. Whereas in this research Constructicon, what we want to do is to really concentrate on what the people that work in this research training group are working on. So, of course, pairing of form with meaning, as is usually the case in Constructicons, but also other kind of research data that could be relevant in order to account for the specific constructions, such as experimental data, corpus data, also the publication that the students will produce, hopefully. This leads to, this means that we are confronted with kind of challenges that are very specific to this research Constructicon, because we have to accommodate the Constructicon to the different perspectives that the different projects have on different constructions. Let me just give you a very brief overview. I can't list all the 13 projects that we have, but I will just want to mention a few. We have, for example, the project of Arya Rastega, which wants to look at idiomatic construction and how which factor will influence how you are able to acquire one idiomatic construction from the L1 to the L2. So this would be based on corpus and experimental studies, and basically will take care of constructions like the one that you can see here. So out of the frying pan into the fire for the English. How does that relate to vom Regen in die Traufe kommen in German, or as Khale Dara Ramadan Wabe Chah Aftadan in Farsi? So this is probably what is close to what we are discussing here in this workshop. How do we account for multilingualism? We have several projects working on that, but okay. That's
Just move the mouse
oh
to the
yeah,
left.
yeah. There's
Or we can first admit Fred.
yeah, exactly. And now,
Mouse to the left. Mouse further to the left.
ah, okay.
And now we should need to click again. Try.
Yeah.
You have to actually click.
Then click to and onto
Yes.
this arrow.
Mhm.
And then
Click.
No? Okay. Another project is the one conducted by Chiara Trombetta. She's now working on, we would need to introduce non-grammatical factors into the Constructicon because she's working on text structuring devices in 16th century Italian historiographical text. So since at that time, publication did not have paragraph and did not have chapters, what strategy do they use in the text in order to account to make it readable and for the readers? So that would involve the kind of construction that the one that you have on the slide. We have another project conducted by Bastian Führer, which has more of a diachronical perspective on several construction. In that case, these are verbs and so-called prefix and particle verbs in German. Maybe you know that übersetzen can mean to translate and to crossover. It looks like being the same verb, but in one hand, it is a prefix verb. You can say ich übersetze if you want to say I translate, like I translate in language, but ich setze über if you want to express that you cross a river. So how did this appear? So in a way, it is a kind of multilingual perspective that he has, but very specific one. So maybe here we want to have different links than the one that we would use for multilinguality. And finally, we also have other factors like cognitive factors. For example, Vania de la Garza is working on literacy and how literacy may affect the L1 attainment in morphosyntax. So she's working on Spanish, but basically how do subject-verb agreements, how is it acquired differently by different speakers, depending on how literate they are, and depending on whether the verb is very frequent or not frequent, whether it is regular, irregular, and such things. So we will have, she's working on behavioral data and brain imagery for that. So as you can see, we are facing a lot of challenges in order to put this into a Constructicon because we will need a high flexibility. First of all, because we can't wait until the end of the PhD project in order to put that in the Constructicon. We have to provide the structure, and then we will see what kind of data will come into that structure. So that's one big challenge. And also, ultimately, in a later stage, we would want to extend that to all research that is carried on at the university, or at least in the linguistic labs that are interested in construction grammar. So this means that it will need to be very, very flexible. And also we have to decide, we have to make a choice between having formalism that is very precise in order to really account for the phenomenon that we are describing, but also something that is relatively user-friendly so that people can do something with own analysis, and we are not the only ones that understand them.
And back with me for another slide of technical stuff. So the main issue with this is, of course, that you saw the kinds of differences of data. I mean, how do you put is brain images, or is the results of brain imaging, is that part of what you need to know about a construction? Well, it might be part of what construction, I'm not sure it's form or function or both or whatever, but we may want to record it with that or information about that with for research documentation purposes. And we think that a Constructicon should be able to do that ideally, which is a long shot, we know. Therefore, there was a research constructing prototype concept created by Malina Patel under the supervision of Stefanie Ewert, a computational linguist. and based on semantic web standards. So apparently, the idea here is that something like RDF triples have the advantage that you can link to anything. Everything is linkable, it's very flexible, and you can link it to any sort of internet resource if you like, no problem there. So Malina converted the CASA Constructicon data structures, and the result doesn't have like a fixed schema, it's highly flexible. That is great for the data analysis, but of course, this also means we don't have like a user interface for that at the moment. So it allows linking of arbitrary resources, aims to be fully machine readable, which is of course something that we only get partially with the CASA Constructicon, where in the fields we have a lot of like rich text data still, where you need to, what needs to be bold-faced or highlighted or something like that. And the question is, to what extent do you want to granularize that? So as I said, we don't have any interface or formatting for this at the moment. So this is sort of a screenshot from Malina's thesis, where we basically have typical RDF triples. That means it's subject predicate structures. So you have two elements linked by some sort of link. And so the syntactic functions, then you have a traditional, a standard, and a CASA function that we provide there, and they all link to the ultimate syntactic function, things like that. The whole thing looks even more accessible than this database schema that we saw earlier. This would be basically the kind of thing. And you see from the line numbers here, I'm still pretty far up in the CASA Constructicon, scrolling down on that file. And this is nothing that you want humans to have to interact with at all, of course. And for us, the question at the moment is, does it make sense? And you see that some of this, if you look closely, that some of this isn't not even fully atomized yet. The question for us is, how do we go about this? How can we structure this? How can we make an interface available? And should we even do that? Or should we go back to database or XML-like formatting instead? And I'd be very much interested to hear what the computational people here think they found is their best solutions to all this. And that's it from our part. We would like to thank you very much for your attention, and sorry for taking so long.